Oh, this is what I wanted to say. So it kind of dawned on me just talking about Brock Purdy and like really trying to do a deep dive in my own mind. Like, why is this guy the most unassuming, one of the best stories? Why is this guy so propped up as a false prophet? People are trying to say that, you know, that there's no real there to him. This cannot be significant beyond the moment that it's in. There's nothing sustainable to the guy. And I think I got a theory that I hadn't really thought about before. And I want to share it with you, and I want to see what you think about it.
Okay.
The NFL is the only league in the world, Larry, that gives its media, its fans, and basically the entire league has full-on permission to laugh at, underestimate, and mock one player, Mr. Irrelevant. There is no other league that mocks the draft of any player at any position in any round but for the NFL, to the point where they throw this freaking galactic loser a parade at Disney World because it's the closest this loser is ever going to come to a parade. And it just sets up someone almost from, you know, a place where they really can't come back from. And I do believe an awful lot of draftism is happening here to Brock Purdy and anyone's evaluations. If Brock Purdy had been a top 10 pick, people would be getting knee pads out to blow him so much. But because he's Mr. Irrelevant.
Nice imagery.
The one place in sports where we've been given full-on permission to underestimate and mock that guy, I think that there's something to it. I think that there really is. And I think that Brock Purdy has done enough being the last pick in the draft to take this Mr. Irrelevant thing and shut it down once and for all. How can you call that position Mr. Irrelevant if a guy who was in an MVP conversation and 2 weeks from now maybe goes on to win a Super Bowl has done that? I think the NFL needs to think about its branding of that draft pick, and I think it's negatively affect Brock Purdy.
Well, I don't know. I think it's partly that. I think it's also partly
to mock the player. It just that's the direction everyone took it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, they think it's kind of cute and everything. It's and I don't care. I mean, these guys are, you know, they can handle it. You know, I'm not one of these people like they're doing a disservice. Stop it. They're having a little fun with the last pick in the draft. And we're all too freaking sensitive. Heck, we lived in an era where every one of our sports games at recess started with all you guys line up on the wall. You and you are coaches, pick teams. Now that would be considered like bullying.
Exclusionary.
Yeah. Well, who's going to get picked last? Oh,
dude, the NBA All-Stars can't even take it. Like you're
right.
An NBA All-Star
seriously.
Team.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
no one will be picked last there.
That's so rich. You've got an entourage and you've got like $85 million in the bank, and we're worried about your feelings. Yeah. Or, you know, I was dissed, man.
Yeah.
You know, I think it has to do with a couple things. One, that I think you're partially right. Two, we are a highlight culture. Nobody takes time to read the book. Everybody's reading the Cliff Notes. You know, so the highlights show Brock Purdy's arm strength and his stature, and nobody's impressed. He's not the kind of guy that if you watch one highlight, you're like, oh yeah, man. Oh yes, that is the guy.
So when you're doing create a player on a Madden game, you don't create Brock Purdy.
He's the opposite, the literal polar opposite of Colin Kaepernick, who everybody, Jaws, who's always super measured, said Colin Kaepernick's going to be the greatest quarterback in the history of the league. Why? Because he was 6'5", 6'6", with unbelievable arm strength, crazy mobility, and you just looked at him and said, man, look at that guy. That guy's tough. He's lean. He's fast. He's got a howitzer.
He just looked cool, too.
He's the future. The future. And he was on the cover of Sports Illustrated, and he was the guy. You look at Brock Purdy, you don't go, oh, yes, cutting edge. And I would say that's a big part of it. Also, Brock's true gifts are all not, you can't see them. He's got rare competitive fire. He's really processes what he sees fast. And so he's super competitive. You can't see that. He's super smart in how he breaks things down. You can't see that. He doesn't have big, broad shoulders. He's got kind of narrow shoulders. He actually weighs about 230 pounds and he's kind of yoked, but he's kind of narrow, structured in his build. So you look at him and you think small guy, but if you stood next to him in the locker room, you realize, oh, this guy's about 230. He's pretty thick, but it doesn't translate to TV. And he just, I think that's it. And then he's on a team that has all these high profile weapons and a high profile coach. And it's just kind of easy to be like, he's just along for the ride. And it's kind of pathetic. I mean, Cam Newton is like, he's not even the best player on the Niners. CMC is. It's like, dude, CMC isn't. It's like, if you knew shit, you'd know it's Trent Williams. So you can't even get your rip down right. I don't know what else to say. I just think that there's nothing. I mean, I'll say this. When the Niners drafted him, and I watched tons of college football, and I knew all about Brock Purdy in college, I wasn't doing cartwheels. I was like, really? They went for that guy? Do they even need a quarterback? And they went for a kind of a quarterback who's kind of a college athlete and not really a pro and this and that. And then a buddy of mine who's scouted said, hey, look, I was in Ames. I've done the close up on this guy. I've done the deep dive. Krug, watch this film, look at this guy. And then he went to Jacksonville, worked on his arm strength, became a little bit more sudden, a little bit. So he had, in my mind, he didn't have requisite arm strength. By the time he got to training camp his rookie year, he had developed requisite arm strength. So then it's like, wow, then now all of his other traits can come to life, like the competitive fire and the processing. And then you mix in the competitiveness and the humility. In a lot of ways, he is very similar to Joe Montana and Tom Brady in that those guys were insanely competitive. And this guy is insanely competitive. And I would kind of compare him as well to another athlete in another sport. He's a little like Steph in that nobody really thought that he's got that baby face. He's kind of like the Bay Area's second baby-faced assassin. And he's a little bit like Ichiro, where his game's not based on power. And so even though he's one of the all-time greats, Ichiro in this case, he doesn't get recognized as one of the all-time greats because we're a power culture and his game wasn't built on power. So
would you call Brock Purdy the Jung-Hoo Lee of the San Francisco 49ers, Larry?
No, I would not. I'd say he's quite a bit better than Jung-Hoo Lee. No, but I think there's a lot of Steph there. From Steph, nobody wanted to say Steph was an assassin until he won. He was like a kid who had good hand-eye coordination. And that's, I think people look at Brock and they're like, he's a product of his surroundings. He's not. If anything, they're a product of him. I mean, here's the one stat. It's amazing how people always forget. They use stats, and then when they don't want to use them anymore, they forget about them. When Brock Purdy ran on the field in a 49er uniform to replace Jimmy Garoppolo against Miami, Week 13 last season, all non-Garoppolo quarterbacks under Kyle Shanahan were 9-29. The guy is now 21-5. So he's totally flipped the, narrative on its ear. It's like no quarterbacks can win in Kyle's system except for Jimmy G. Oh, really? This guy can win in Kyle's system better than Jimmy G. But all those other guys were dogs with fleas. So, it's amazing how, we use that stat to prop up Jimmy G as the ultimate winner. Now you get a guy who steps in who's even better than Jimmy G in every way imaginable, to the point where Juszczyk, Kittle, and some of the guys that were like Jimmy G's boys would admit that Brock's world's better than Jimmy G.
And here's the thing. Jimmy Garoppolo was a pretty good quarterback for the 49ers. I mean, he really was. He
won.
tearing it down of Jimmy G to make a point about Brock, like, I think is unnecessary. Jimmy G in another system is a totally different guy, but for the system, when he was in it, he fit it very well. And Brock is even a better fit, which I guess makes him more of a system quarterback. And now here we go again. And now the conversation never ends. Did you